While the war in Gaza continues, there's another battle being fought, not with weapons, but with ideas. It's a fight over what comes next, the day after. Dozens of competing plans for Gaza's future are suddenly on the table. So let's get past the headlines and really unpack the core debate over what that future could look like.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with this flood of day-after plans, and then we'll see how they all really boil down to two competing blueprints. We can call them the manager's plan and the people's plan. We'll look at some real-world examples of each, then we're going to zoom out to see how this whole debate is really rooted in a century of conflict. And that'll bring us to the fundamental choice at the heart of it all. Is this about reconstruction, or is it about liberation?
It's actually kind of wild how many different proposals for Gaza's future are suddenly popping up. Seriously, they're coming from everywhere. International groups, regional powers, think tanks, even corporations. And what's becoming super clear is that there's a real competition happening right now to define everything from Gaza's physical streets to its political future.
And really, this is the question that's hanging over everything. After all this devastation, what does a real, viable future for Gaza and its people even look like? The stakes, as you can imagine, could not be higher, and the answers are anything but simple.
Now here's the thing. Even though there are dozens of these individual plans floating around, if you look closely, you start to see that they pretty much all fall into one of two camps. Underneath all the policy speak and shiny presentations, there's a deep ideological clash between two totally opposing philosophies for the future.
On one side, you've got what we're calling the manager's plan. This is a very top-down approach, driven by outside powers. It's all about security, big economic projects, and international supervision. It's like they're trying to design a state like an architect designs a building. But on the other side, you have the people's plan. This is a bottom-up approach led by Palestinians, and its core belief is simple. You can't just rebuild buildings. You have to restore political rights, local ownership, and self-determination first.
This chart here really lays out the massive difference between these two approaches. Just look at some of the factors experts use to analyze these plans. You've got degree of Palestinian representation. Does it actually give them leadership, or does it totally exclude them? And what about the political horizon? Is the end goal a two-state solution, or is it just managing the situation forever? These are the fault lines where the two blueprints completely break apart.
Okay, so let's dive a little deeper into that first blueprint, the manager's plan. This is the philosophy that basically sees reconstruction as a technical problem that can be solved from the outside, and you can see why it's appealing to some international players, right? It promises stability and control, and it frames the whole issue in terms of security and investment, which are concepts they know how to handle.
A perfect example of this in action is the Trump-Peltzman plan, which some people have nicknamed the Gaza Riviera plan. It's basically a 50-year build, operate, transfer model. In this vision, Gaza isn't a political community fighting for freedom. It's just a site for commercial investment, completely disconnected from any kind of national project.
And the implications of that are, well, they're staggering. The plan's own author, Joseph Peltzman, said it requires that the place be completely emptied out. Just let that sink in for a second. What does it even mean to treat a place and the people who live there like a blank slate that you can just dig up and start over?
There's a term for this kind of thinking. Critics call it disaster capitalism. It's this idea of using a moment of total crisis, a war, a hurricane, whatever, as a golden opportunity for private money to rush in and totally restructure society around profit. It's literally turning a human tragedy into a business opportunity.
And another name that's come up in this top-down model is Tony Blair. There's been talk of him leading some kind of board for Gaza. As you can imagine, that has sparked some fierce criticism, especially given his legacy in the region. One historian even called him a ghost from the past. This really speaks to the deep, deep distrust of outside players who have a history of intervention.
Okay, but there is a completely different vision for Gaza's future out there. So now let's flip the script and look at that second blueprint, the one that's all about Palestinian agency and self-determination. This approach says, no, the people themselves have to be the architects of their own future.
And the best example of this is something called the Gaza Phoenix Plan. It's a framework developed by Palestinians, and people have described it as a resistant urban manifesto. I love that phrase. It completely reframes the whole idea of planning. It's not just a technical job, it's an act of liberation in itself.
The principles of this plan are just a world away from the manager's model. It's built around ideas like spatial justice and putting community agency right at the center of everything. It also explicitly rejects any funding that comes with political strings attached, and that's huge because that's been a major roadblock to Palestinian autonomy for decades. It focuses on housing that's actually culturally and environmentally right for the area. And maybe the biggest point of all, the implementer isn't some foreign border corporation. It's the community. This is a vision that's all about local ownership and control.
Now, to really get why these two visions are clashing so hard, we have to zoom out a bit, because this isn't just a debate about how to rebuild after a war. This is actually the latest chapter in a fight over Palestinian political existence that's been going on for more than 100 years.
The historian Bishara Dumane calls this an iron law of the conflict. What he means is that for over a century, a central, unchanging feature has been the refusal by powerful outsiders to even acknowledge Palestinians as a political community that has a right to determine its own fate.
And this timeline really traces that history of erasure. It goes way back to 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, which made a distinction between political rights for one group and only civil and religious rights for the non-Jewish communities already living there. Then comes 1948, the Nakba, the catastrophe, which saw the mass displacement of Palestinians. Tragically, this became the defining event that forged a modern Palestinian identity around the shared experience of losing their homes. And even as recently as 1993, the Oslo Accords, which on the surface looked like a step forward, ultimately weakened the PLO and, according to many, made a truly viable Palestinian state impossible.
So, all of that brings us right back to today. And when you look at all these day-after plans through that historical lens, you can see that they're forcing a fundamental choice, a choice that echoes through this entire painful history. It's a choice between two profoundly different paths forward.
So, when you boil it all down, the real debate isn't about the technical stuff. It's not about concrete and steel. It's about power. It's about agency. Is rebuilding Gaza a technical problem for outside managers to come in and solve, or is it a fundamental political right that belongs to the people who actually live there?
And that leaves us with this final, really critical question to think about. Is the ultimate goal here just to rebuild the physical buildings and roads of Gaza, or is it to restore the dignity, the sovereignty, and the self-determination of its people? The answer to that question is going to define not just the next few years, but generations to come.